In this part, I want to focus exclusively on this pose here. It is frame 180 in my animation, and this is when the character bends his lower arm. And what I'm trying to achieve is the appearance that the flesh of the upper arm and lower arm squash against each other. In reality, these body parts interact with each other because there is muscle inside and there is volume to the muscle. But in CG in general, we just get these simple representation of the bone. And we kind of have to cheat a little bit to create the feeling of muscle. So there are many ways to achieve this, but the main thing that I want to show you is a way to create bones that react to the rotation of the arm. You can support CGDive by purchasing this course or some of the exclusive courses on academy.cgdive.com. Subscription is also available. Okay, let's go to our metarig. Okay, for the solution that I ended up using, I'm going to need two bones, one for the lower arm and one for the upper arm in this area. And as the lower arm rotates in this direction, this additional bone will rotate in this direction and this one in this direction, and that will create this feeling of the muscles pressing against each other. Let's go to edit mode, turn on in front, select this connection at the elbow and press E to extrude a new bone. Then I'm going to place the cursor in this area and Shift S, selection to cursor. Let's extrude another bone, set the cursor around the bicep area, Shift S, selection to cursor. I'm going to tweak the bone roll with Control R just a little bit, something like that. Then I'm going to select both bones, Alt P, and choose disconnect bone. Let's name these bones. This one will be lower arm squash is what I'm going to call it. And this one will be upper arm squash. Let's add .L for each of these. I can also select them, go to pose mode and make both of them raw copy. And now how do we automate these bones in a way that is going to carry over to our generated rig? Believe it or not, it is extremely simple. I can simply constrain this bone to the forearm of the metarig. And when I do, this will translate to the final generated rig. I'm going to demonstrate really quickly. Select the forearm, Shift select this new bone, Control Shift C and choose copy rotation. Set it to local space and local space. And now if I rotate this arm, the new bone rotates with it. Let's generate. Now if I move the IK handle here, you'll see that this new bone carried over to the final rig because it's raw copy, but also this constraint carried over, and the target in the metarig was the metarig, and here it was automatically switched to the generated rig, and the bone was switched to the ORG bone in the generated rig. You see I can tweak the influence slider and it will affect the way this bone is constrained. So that's great. We can very easily create these kinds of constraints. Let's go back to the metarig. And now I'm going to do just one minor tweak. I'm going to go to edit mode and Shift D, duplicate this bone, and with individual origins or something like that, scale it down. Alt P and clear parent. F to rename it, and I'm going to call it MCH. I want this bone to be MCH. Lower arm copy. And then in pose mode, I'm going to constrain this new bone. So select the lower arm or the forearm, then shift select the new bone and Control Shift C, copy transforms. And then I'm going to be constraining all of these new bones to this new MCH bone. Constraining straight to the metarig bone seems to work, but I don't think that is the ideal best practice. So I try to avoid it. I also want to make sure that this new bone is a raw copy. Now I'm going to get rid of this copy rotation, and then I'm going to try to actually set up this bone. Now at the end, these new bones will be deformation bones, so let's name them DEF. Now I'm going to create a constraint for this new deformation bone in the lower arm. So select the new MCH bone, then shift select this deformation bone, Control Shift C, and then I'm going to add one of my favorite constraints, transformation. I want the rotation to drive the rotation. And for the values, I basically want this arm to rotate for a while without any effect on this bone. And then when I reach this area where the lower arm should start pressing against the bicep, I want this bone to slightly start rotating backwards. While I was demonstrating, I noticed that the parenting is not set up correctly, so I need to parent this bone to the lower arm with keep offset. Now this new deformation bone will be rotating together with the lower arm, and then through this constraint that I want to set up, it will start to automatically rotate after the lower arm has reached a certain limit. So let's set this up. I want the influence to start when the lower arm reaches around 60 degrees on the x-axis. As you can see, this is the x-axis rotation. And then it will go all the way to around 160 or so. And in this interval, I want this additional bone, this tweak bone, to rotate backwards to around -60. These are the values that I got from my tests. And very importantly, I need to switch to local space to local space. Now you can see the effect right away. At first, this bone just moves together with the lower arm. That is thanks to the parenting. And then when it reaches this area, it starts rotating in the opposite direction of the lower arm. Okay, for this bone, I want something very, very similar. Here I notice that the bone roll of this bone is different. As you can see, this rotation here is the Z, whereas on this bone, the same plane is the X-axis. So let's go to edit mode and fix that. I think if I set the roll to -45 degrees and then go to pose mode, then yes, I'll have exactly that. And now I can simply shift select this bone that already has the constraint and copy the constraint. And let's see what happens. Yeah, and I just think that this bone should go a little bit further. So I'm going to go for something like -80. I'm just going to make these deformation bones a little bit longer. Let's turn off x-axis mirror, and I'm going to delete all of these bones on the right side and delete them. They weren't set up correctly, the constraints and everything is not there. So if I symmetrize them, then they should work as I expect. Okay, I'm going to undo. This bone, the lower arm copy, does not have the .l suffix. Symmetrize. And now in pose mode, yeah, it is working. Let's generate. Set our action. And play it through. Now nothing will have happened because these bones are not yet part of the armature. Need a Blender add-on? Stop by addons.cgdive.com and discover hundreds of well-organized Blender resources. I have to parent this guy again with empty groups, then switch to the deformation bones, shift select the character and go to weight paint mode. Now I want to paint values for these new bones with a very low strength value. So I'm just painting lightly in the area which they seem to be affecting. And the effect seems to be too strong, so let's blur a little bit. Especially here. I'm going to paint back some weights for this bone. Some blurring. And I'm already starting to see the effect that I intended. I should paint some weights on the lower part of the arm as well. And then blur. While I was playing around with this, I found something interesting. If I paint some weights not only on the bicep area but on the opposite side, which is basically the tricep. Let's turn off overlays and just paint here. You'll see that I get some volume on the back side. Right now it's too pronounced, but if I blur it, then I think it will look better. Let's check this deformation again now. See how the back side of the arm is bulging a little bit, which kind of simulates the tricep action. Again, this is not muscle simulation. We are just trying to achieve the feeling of muscle under these polygons. I'm trying not to overdo this effect. I want to keep it subtle. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the lower arm. So I'm going to paint some positive weights very lightly with a strength of 0.1 at the opposite side of the arm, like that, and then blur. Some more blurring. And let's see the effect that we got. And that looks good to me, and I think it's much better than what we had before. So now, while we are working in this area, let's also add another bone that will create a sharper elbow deformation. Let's go back to the metarig, edit mode, and again I want to start from this elbow area. Just select any of the heads or tails in this area, for example this one. Press E to extrude and constrain the extrusion on the Y-axis by pressing Y. Select this new bone, press Alt-P and choose disconnect bone, F2 to rename it, and call it DEF elbow. It's currently parented to the upper arm, which I think will work well. And now I want to create another very simple constraint from this lower arm copy to the new elbow bone. So Ctrl-Shift-C and choose copy rotation. Switch to local space and reduce the influence to about 0.5. Now when I rotate this arm, you see the effect that this is having. The elbow is kind of staying between the rotation of the upper arm and lower arm. Curious what it looks like without the copy rotation constraint. Let's add .L to this elbow and symmetrize it. Okay, because I had x-axis mirror activated in edit mode, I already have a bone here, but it doesn't have a constraint. So let's select it in pose mode, then switch to edit mode, press X and delete it. And now everything should be set up correctly. So I'm going to clear my transforms. Keep in mind that if you create a pose in pose mode for a metarig, your generated rig will reflect that. So you want your metarig to be in the default position. Unhide the generated rig and generate. The elbow is not there. Again, I forgot to set the row copy rig type. Let's do that. Row copy on the other side. Now I can generate and parent with empty groups. Apply the action. Go to this pose that I'm interested in, frame 180. Shift select the character, weight paint mode, control click this new elbow bone and start painting weights for it. And right away you see the effect that this is having. I have a sharper elbow. Now I think it's too sharp, so I'm going to paint a little bit more in the neighboring areas, like this. A little bit of blurring. And I think that looks good. You can keep painting weights. You can even, if I go to pose mode for this bone, you can add more constraints. For example, you can create a constraint that scales this bone in this direction or moves it a bit in this direction. Either way, you'll get a more pronounced elbow. But to me, this is looking okay, so I'm going to call this one done. I'm just going to check if I can spot any problems, and then we can move on to the next section. So here I noticed something. For just one frame, in my case it's frame 211, I get this weird flipping of these new deformation bones that I added. I'm not sure if you are going to get it. I think that will depend a lot on the position of your bones, so just a slight offset of the bones may produce slightly different behavior. But anyway, when you do get these kind of flippings in constrained bones, one thing that you can try is to change the mode for the transformation constraint. So when I have it to auto Euler or XYZ Euler, I get this flipping. But with XZY Euler, I don't get it. Through testing, I found that very often switching to quaternions fixes these kind of issues or reduces them quite a lot. But actually, I want to go to the metarig and see if I can find a solution that works with auto Euler with the default settings. So currently, this bone, this MCH bone that we created, that is constrained to the lower arm, does not have a parent. So let's parent it to the upper arm the same way that the lower arm is parented to the upper arm, with keep offset. And let's quickly try to generate the rig. Apply my action and let's visualize the bones, and yeah, the flipping is gone. That's good. That's great. So I can slowly go through the section and see if I get any flipping at all. And it seems to be good. So I'm going to go back to the metarig and do the same thing for the other arm. Oh, because I had x-axis mirror, that's already done. Let's see, 211. The other arm doesn't have the problem either, so perfect. Okay, and another issue I see is that at this extreme angle, when the arm really rotates on its own axis, I get this ugly deformation in this area. And I believe this has to do with the parenting of this deformation bone over here. Currently it is parented to the ORG bone of the whole arm. Instead of drawing it, let's visualize the ORG bones. So this is the ORG upper arm bone, and this bone is parented to it. Instead, I want it to be parented to this additional deformation bone that is created when the rig is generated. Let's quickly give that a try. If I select this bone and press F2, I'll get its name. I'll press Ctrl-C and copy it. Then I'm going to select this bone, switch to edit mode, and in the bone tab on the parent, I'm going to press Ctrl-V and paste this bone name that I just copied. And then if I switch again to pose mode, you'll see that this area has changed. The deformation area has changed. And in my opinion, it is better. So I want this bone to be parented like that, to this additional bone that we get once we generate the rig. One way to achieve this is what I just did. We go in the generated rig and change the parenting. The problem with that is that every time I regenerate my rig from the metarig, this parenting will be undone. And that's not good. So that presents the opportunity to show you one of the super advanced features of the raw copy rig type. There is a way to tell the raw copy in the metarig to change its parent when the rig is being generated. So let's try to do that. I'll go to object mode, hide generated rig, go to the metarig in edit mode, or actually in pose mode. I'm going to select this deformation bone, go to rig type options, and enable Relink Constraints. And when I do, I get a new field that says parent. In it, I'm just going to press Ctrl-V and paste this name that I copied earlier. So just in case you didn't copy it, you can go to your generated rig, select this bone, press F2, or simply hover in this area in the bone tab, Ctrl-C and copy it, and then go to the metarig. And in this Relink Constraints area, I want to paste this name. And that, as I explained a minute ago, that will parent this bone in the metarig to another bone that doesn't yet exist, but it will exist when we generate the rig. So that's a bit of a Rigify inception for you. And I have to do the same thing on the other side, and I'm going to paste this name. The only thing that I need to change here is that instead of L, I need this to be .R. I think that makes sense because we want to parent this bone to this bone that will be generated in this area. And since this bone is on the right side, it has the .R suffix. All right, I can generate, apply my action, activate layer 29, go to edit mode, select this bone, and under relations, you'll see that its parent is the bone that we set in the raw copy options. And this one also, just as I set it, deformation upper arm .R002. Okay, that's it for this chapter. We made good progress, and I think we managed to use a lot of advanced features. Especially this Relink Constraint option that I just showed you is very, very advanced, and I guarantee you that very, very few people know and understand it and use it. Okay, great. Now we're going to move away from the arms, and we'll be focusing on the legs and belly next. That's it for this chapter. Please like, subscribe, and check out our other projects, academy.cgdive.com and addons.cgdive.com.